ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Namaskar friends. In this video we will know about the intuitive knowledge of the nature of discriminating between Atma and Anatman. This is very important information. Atma has pervaded or engulfed everything in the form of intuitive experience or consciousness. All the transactions in his day-to-day life of the jiva, that is the soul, is going on in the light of this Atma, of the essence of pure being consciousness bliss alone. This truth is affirmed by the scriptures in the manner our functions like squatting, roaming about, doing work, returning, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, all these desiderate or are taking place perforce in Atman's light of consciousness alone, to wit without his light called intuition, which is existing in everyone, nay, everything eternally, but in a potential form or a latent state like the very substratum in a sense all pervading. Like for all pervading space or sun's light, there is no activity whatsoever, no dynamic life, no being at all. To know the essential nature of Atma through individual or separate functions enumerated above amounts to a partial or incomplete perception. But to intuit or cognize that Atman consciousness is one which pervades everything that is within the ken of all perceptual and conceptual knowledges or experiences, and in truth is the complete, consummate, and plenary perception or intuitive experience. All this we have taken into our reckoning and explained so far. What is the difference between the attainment of the knowledge of the self or Atma and the attainment of the knowledge of the non-self or Anatman? In both the cases, the knowledge accruing is experience alone of the form of the result or fruit, and it is already mentioned that this alone is called by wise people avagati, that is the attainment of the end result of intuition. In fact, Sri Shankaracharya, while commenting on the above scriptural statement, has opined that by the valid means, that is pramana of knowledge called jnana, Brahma, that is the ultimate reality, has to be cognized or intuited, is it not? The attainment of the intuitive knowledge of Brahma alone is the goal of human life or existence, that is Purusartha, for that destroys or sublates, falsifies all the impediments like avidya, kama, karma, etc., which are the cause for the transmigratory existence, that is samsara. But what is meant by the statement Brahma should be cognized or known by means of jnana, that is intuition or intuitive knowledge. Brahma means Atma or the self of all of us. Knowledge can comprehend only that which is of the form of an object, but Atma does not have any form whatsoever. In that case, what is the import of this statement? Such a doubt may arise in our mind quite naturally and justifiably too. In this regard, Sri Shankara further writes that this illusion, abhasa of Atam Chetana, that is pure consciousness of the self, first of all gets manifested in the intellect, for intellect is just like Atman or the self, extremely pure, highly transparent, and extremely subtle. The illusion of that intellect is the mind, that mind's illusions are the senses, the latter's illusion is the body. Therefore, different people have acknowledged everything from the intellect down to the body as Atma or the self alone. This being the case, along with all objects which are superimposed or misconceived because of avidya, that is ignorance, atma chaitanya, that is the pure consciousness of the self, is ever appearing indeed. Hence, the knowledge, intuitive experience called atma is not to be procured afresh at all. Only the superimpositions of an atman, that is non-self of the types of nama, that is names, rupa, that is forms, etc. on atma of the essence of pure consciousness, have to be sublated or falsified. In the manner I am not the body, I am not the senses, I am not the mind, I am not the intellect. If the seeker observes, intuits with a one-pointed concentration of the introverted mind and determines, then that is enough, because of the reason that Brahma is extremely popular or familiar in the form or nature of Chaitanya, that is consciousness. There is no necessity whatsoever of attempting to cognize or intuit that Chaitanya afresh or anew. This then is the purport of the Bhashya sentence mentioned above. For this reason alone, in all the Upanishadic texts, there is no effort whatsoever made to indicate the essential nature of Brahma, that is the ultimate reality of the essence of pure absolute consciousness as such and such, by means of any injunctions or stipulations, to wit pure consciousness of ourself, which is our innermost innate essence of being, cannot ever be brought under the limitations, restrictions, or constraints of time, space, causation, categories, and hence it cannot be subject to injunctions or stipulations. It, that is, Brahma or Atma, as pure absolute consciousness, is infinite, absolutely free, immutable, and non dual, having nothing second to it. And hence, Brahma or Atma has been signified or sufferance or for purpose of teaching by merely refuting or sublating throughout those qualities or characteristics which do not exist in it or pertain to it in any manner whatsoever, by expressions like not this, not that. The Adhyatma Yoga method of practice that has been taught in the Kathopanishad in order to help cognize or intuit our Supreme Self is also, if analyzed properly, for merely sublating or refuting the apparent supreme position that we all quite naturally have misconceived in the ultimate reality of ourself. There is immense benefit accruing to Jijyasus, that is, true seekers, from deliberating on another such sentence found in the Geeta Bhashya of Sri Shankara. The purport of this Bhashya sentence is, if properly observed, although Atma, that is our self, is extremely popular or familiar very easily knowable or cognizable, nearest or most intimate compared to all other things or phenomena, and the very Atma, that is a sense of being alone of the people in general. For those who lack discrimination, this Brahma or reality of pure consciousness appears to be unfamiliar or unpopular, to be very difficult to cognize or know, to be far off from them and an entity different or apart from themselves. But for those who have the intellect which has withdrawn itself from the external forms of objects, that is, intellect which has become introverted and who have acquired the grace of the perceptor as well as the Supreme Self, there does not exist any other entity which is easier to comprehend, which is more popular or familiar, which is easier to know or cognize, and which is extremely nearer than anything else to oneself. Now we can understand as to what difference there exists between the knowledge of the self known as self-knowledge in Vedantic parlance and the knowledge of an atman, that is non-self. First of all, because the phenomenon of an atman is external to ourselves, the person who wants to know or cognize it just as one wishes to know an earthen pot which exists externally or outside himself as an object, has to acquire the mental concept antakarana virti of the form of that object of perception, parmeya. The mental concept, thought, should become that form and pervade it. At the end of this empirical transaction involving the valid means of knowledge, pratyaksha, pramana, or sensuous perception, the knowledge of the earthen pot or its experience should perforce manifest itself. But in the case of Atma, or other hand, on the other hand, because he does not have any form whatsoever, in fact, he is subtler than even the concept of space. The empirical dealing or transaction of the valid means of cognition is of no avail. It should be determined with all certainty that the empirical transaction of using the valid means of knowledge itself is the result or fruit of superimposition or misconception, which means that those special features or characteristics are misconceived to exist in Atma of the essential nature of pure being consciousness bliss. The certainty or conviction that Atman alone is real should accrue. That means the usual faith that only when the real valid means of cognition are utilized to know or perceive their respective real objects, then alone a real thing or entity is cognized, becomes a hindrance. In other words, our deep our deep-seated and long-cherished belief Abhinivesa of the type using this valid means of knowledge, Pramana, I know or cognize this particular object of knowledge, Parmya, is a misconception, and this fact looms large very clearly before our intellect. Evidently, the ano- anomalous proposition confronts us in the manner. How is it possible to cognize Brahma or Atma, who is the very essence of being of the valid means of cognition, Parmana, by means of these very valid means? Secondly, when the knowledge of anatman, that is not self, accrues, the result of the empirical transaction of utilizing the valid means of knowledge alone is called the anatman's experience, anubhava. This should invariably manifest itself at the end of the empirical transaction of utilizing the valid means of knowledge alone. But in the case of Atman, on the other hand, the cognition or intuitive experience of Atman accrues in a manner of speaking only after the sublation or disappearance of the knowledge of the cognizer, Paramatru. In this regard, Sri Shankaracharya has exemplified a verse quoted by those who are well versed and are adepts with the sampradaya, that is the traditional methodology handed down through the ages from the guru to the shishya, and that verse runs as follows. The meaning is before the attainment of the self-knowledge which is to be searched out, Atman has Paramattattva, that is the cognizership. But when it is searched out, that is intuitive, Paramatru, that is cognizer, alone becomes rid of Padamsha, that is the defects of sins, demerits, and such other defilements of the transmigratory self or soul. A person who is searching for his lost cow even after finding it out remains or continues to be its owner or lord indeed. But searching for Atma and finding him out are not like that empirical transaction. For Atma is the very essence of reality or being alone of that person who is searching. Unfortunately, as things stand and quite naturally, all of us have known Atma, that is ourself, wrongly as the Paramatru, that is the cognizer, one who invariably uses the body, the senses, and the mind because of the adhyasa, that is misconception or delusion. Therefore, when we cognize or intuit Atma as taught in the scriptures, not only do we come to know that our Paramatruva, that is the cognizership, is superimposed upon or misconceived in our essential nature of absolute being, consciousness, bliss, but also attain the plenary intuitive experience of the type. I alone am the Supreme Self, Paramatman, who is beyond dharma, all religious merits, and adharma, religious demerits or sins, who is eternally pure, conscious, and liberated or free, and who is of the very essence of pure consciousness or intuition is attained. Here, the already existing or eternal Siddh, mm, Siddhanubhava, that is ever existing intuitive experience alone manifests itself or becomes self-effulgent, so to speak, at the end in the form of a result or fruit. This is a special feature in this regard. One by oneself knows or cognizes oneself by means of oneself. Thirdly, in the case of an Atman, nescience, nescience that is not knowing as also knowing it wrongly, misconceiving, together called in Vedantic parlance ajnana, is destroyed or falsified by its knowledge. For example, having seen a rope lying at a distance without knowing its reality to be rope, we believe or rather misconceive it to be a snake and consequently experience the hardships of fear and trembling, etc. All these are sublated or falsified, removed by the proper knowledge of the rope, but this knowledge cannot prevent the same kind of rope snake delusion occurring on another occasion. However, it is not so in the case of self-knowledge. After the conviction of the type, eternally pure, conscious, and liberated Supreme Self alone is myself, is gained by us. Neither the delusion of the type, I am a transmigratory soul, nor the ill effects that may be caused by that delusion can ever possibly arise. For the misconception or delusion with regard to an object of knowledge, permaya, and the knowledge gained through the valid means that can falsify or sublate the delusion, pramana, jnana, both accrues to the cognizer paramatru alone. Therefore, even after the cognition or perception of the object is gained, the cognizership of the cognizer remains as it is, but our ignorance, avidya or ajnana that is caused with regard to our essential nature of Atma and the conviction to the effect I am externally or liberated entity are both phenomena which are misconceived in our superimposed upon our essential nature of pure being consciousness, bliss of supreme self. Now the concept uh, or belief of the type I am a cognizer, Paramatru is very strong or steadfast in us, but after self-realization as much strong or steadfast, perhaps even more strong or steadfast, will there be a conviction born out of the Vedantic intuitive experience of the type I was not a cognizer in the past, even now I am not and cannot become one in the future? For cognizership, time and the divisions or distinctions of valid means of knowledge and objects of knowledge are all extremely false. They do not possess any existence whatsoever apart from that atman. For one who is not a cognizer, wherefrom can delusion accrue? Therefore, it is quite certain that by self-knowledge, avidya, that is ignorance, is completely forever sublated or removed. Fourthly, after the knowledge of an object which is an atman has accrued, not only does the person of the type I cognize this thing takes place, but also with regard to it. Hetva, that is the concept that this is bad, it is the cause for my grief and so I must avoid it. Or Updetva, that is the concept of the type. This is good, it is the cause for my happiness, hence I must acquire it, will arise. Thus, between these two concepts, viz. To acquire a thing or to avoid it, in accordance with it, other perverti or nivarti respectively is bound to occur. When Atma is not intuitively experienced but avidya or ajnana of the form of misconception, abhyasa still remains. As a result of this, there subsists a desire of either acquiring desirable things or avoiding undesirable things, indeed having at attachment, raga or hatred, dvesa, towards the external object alone is the cause for this. And then, as the effect of this avidya alone, concept like kartrutva, doership, and bhoktirtva, enjoyership remain. The belief of the type I should perform good or meritorious acts or deeds, acquire what is desirable and enjoy it. I should see that I do not experience undesirable fruits by performing bad acts or deeds. Existing quite naturally in man is due to this avidya alone. Therefore, the knowledge of the object which is anatman, that is the non-self, is the cause for both pravritti and nivritti. But it is not so in the case of self-knowledge at all. The intuitive experience of the type I am not the doer, not the enjoyer or experience of an object, but I am the supreme self alone who is beyond or who has transcended dharma, that is religious stipulations or rites, as also its empirical opposite, viz. Adharma, that is religious prohibitions, is itself self-knowledge. Even after the knowledge of Atman is acquired, there exists grief, shock. But after self-knowledge is attained, there does not exist any grief, for there is no attachment, moha at all. After that self-knowledge is attained, the scriptures state that meaning one's self exists in itself by itself. Just as when all illness disappears in a person's body, there is no incongruity or discordance whatsoever of the elements of the body, and thereby health is stated to have been revived. Similarly, on the disappearance of the undesirable hindrancing like avidya and its consequent effects like kama, desires, karma, action, bhoga, enjoyment, vasana, latent impressions, the eternal healthy state of one's own pure consciousness beliefs accrue and it is revived. For that reason alone, after this knowledge of the self is attained, the doership, kartrutva, and enjoyership, bhaktirtva, both do not exist whatsoever. Therefore, then in that event, there is no room or scope for the either perverti or nivarti. Sri Shankaracharya has stated the intuitive experience of Brahma, that is the ultimate reality, is the supreme or paramount goal of human existence or birth, for it destroys completely avidya, that is ignorance, and such other causes for transmigratory lives of existence, samsara. He further says, self is known or intuited, one becomes a jnani, that is realizes, as also one becomes an embodiment of the fulfillment of human life's purpose. In this regard, there is no room for any disputants having any doubts or for any other type of non-believer, or for this is a knowledge of certainty, aptitude, certitude, which culminates in intuitive experience. Hereafter there is no ajnana, that is nescience, which has to disappear, nor there any knowledge that is to be attained or acquired. In this context, questions or doubts pertaining to jnanis of the type, don't they perform any karma, that is any action at all, do not they work for the betterment or well-being of the human society, become redundant, nay ridiculous. Indeed, we can recall that statement made by Swami Vivekananda. What we call betterment of society is the work of sweeping the debris lying on the road by scavengers. To explain, although a jnani is one who is firmly established in Atma consciousness, that is the very essence of all existence, both the insentient and the sentient being in the nature. Speaking from the empirical viewpoint, the common people to get benefit of the humanitarian service from the Jnani, though the sun remains in the sky as he is in all glory and belief. For people who live on earth, it can be said in a manner speaking that the sun renders immense benefit and help to carry on their day-to-day transaction. In the same way, from one who is establishing self-knowledge to the world at large keeps on getting a great deal of help, that is spiritual solace. Indeed, it is known from historical and mythological texts that there exist great stupendous, nay Herculean tasks or mystic acts performed by spiritual luminaries who are like ordained incarnations of God Himself for the general well-being of the society. Thus, a jnani, that is the realized soul, attains fulfillment of life's purpose by getting rid of ajnana, that is any science once for all. Here I stop this video. Thank you, dear friends. Thank you. Namaste. Namaste.